My name is Mark Thompson. I am 52 years old, and I am an ordinary man living an ordinary life in Michigan. I have been working in an auto parts factory for as long as I can remember. 2 months ago, something terrible happened to me that still haunts me. What I'm about to share is a horrible experience I had on a rainy afternoon coming back home from work. It was a typical Friday. The sky had been gray since the morning, and the weather was ready for a storm. I've been through this many times. Rainy days are common here in Michigan, especially during the fall. The factory where I work is on the outskirts of the city, in a remote industrial area. The work is heavy and repetitive, but it pays the bills and keeps my mind occupied. I leave home at 5 in the morning every day, drive for about half an hour to the factory, and spend the day amidst the noise of machines, the smell of oil and metal, and the tight routine. That day, I left work around 5 in the afternoon. I was exhausted and just wanted to get home, take a hot shower, and relax. The commute is usually smooth, but the rain started pouring heavily as soon as I got in the car. The roads were wet and slippery, and visibility was low. I picked up my car from the factory parking lot, an old Ford Taurus that has been with me for years. As soon as I turned the engine on, I entered the highway, but soon got stuck in a traffic jam. The intense rain turned the traffic into chaos. The streets were full of cars trying to get home, and water was accumulating on the sides of the road, making the journey even more difficult. I decided to take a detour that, although longer, would get me home faster. The detour was a secondary road, poorly lit and surrounded by trees. It was one of those roads that nobody uses unless they really need to. The constant rains had turned the road into a muddy and slippery path. The rain was pounding on the car roof, and the windshield wipers could barely keep up. Even with reduced visibility, I managed to keep going, eager to get out of that hell. Then, in the middle of that storm, I saw a girl by the side of the road. She was completely drenched and looked desperate. She was signaling for me to stop. At first, I didn't want to stop, but seeing that little girl completely wet and without shelter moved me, and I quickly stopped the car beside her, rolled down the window, and asked what she was doing there, alone in the rain. She didn't say much, just asked for a ride. I looked around, trying to understand if there was anyone else, but saw nothing but rain. I opened the door and let her in. The girl was small, probably around 8 or 9 years old, barefoot and shivering from the cold. She was wearing a light dress, completely inappropriate for the weather. I tried to make conversation, asking where she lived and why she was there, but she only replied that she needed to go to the city. The ride to the city was silent, with her staring straight ahead, not answering my questions. When we reached the city, the girl asked me to stop. She quickly got out and disappeared into the rain, without even thanking me. I found the whole thing very strange. But with the storm intensifying, I just wanted to get home. I got home almost an hour later. The rain was at its peak, with lots of thunder and lightning. I parked the car, went inside, and changed clothes. My house is simple, but cozy. A typical suburban house, with a small garden in the front and a basement where I keep some of my father's things. I went to the living room and turned on the TV to watch a talent show, trying to relax and forget the tough day at work. The living room was cozy. with a lamp softly illuminating the space. My dog was lying on the couch, and the house had that familiar smell of fresh coffee. My wife was in the kitchen, preparing dinner. We had planned a quiet family night, something we always valued after a week of work. After a few minutes, I heard the doorbell. I looked at the clock and wondered who it could be at that hour, in the middle of a storm. I got up and went to the door. I asked who it was, but no one answered. I went back to the living room, thinking I might have heard wrong. However, as soon as I sat down, the doorbell rang again. This time, I went straight to open the door without asking. But again, there was no one. My wife asked who it was, but I said, "There's no one here, honey." So, I wasn't hearing things. Someone had indeed rung the doorbell. The rain was still pouring, and I started to get disturbed. I put on a raincoat and went out to check around the house. I walked to the basement door outside and noticed it was ajar. This surprised me because I never leave the basement door open. In the basement, I keep my father's antiques, valuable stuff that is only kept there because of the lack of space inside the house. I decided to check. Due to the storm, the house was without power, so I used a flashlight. As I went down to the basement, I saw something strange on the dirty floor. There were wet footprints, as if someone drenched had been there. I started to rummage through the stuff, looking for anything out of place. Everything seemed fine. I felt the rain easing, and that's when I heard heavy breathing, clearly not mine. Maybe I didn't hear it before because of the storm. I started following the sound of the breathing, holding a volleyball bat I found on the way. The breathing was coming from behind some boxes in the corner of the basement. When I got there, I shined the flashlight and saw a person totally wet and muddy sitting in the corner of the basement. I almost fell from fright. I asked, "Who are you? What are you doing down here?" But whoever it was didn't say anything. I got closer, and that's when I realized it was the same girl from the road. I almost had a panic attack. I couldn't understand how she got there. Did she follow me? But how? I had left her almost an hour away. I tried to talk to her, but she didn't respond. She was pale, barefoot, and seemed to be freezing. I told her to stay there, and I'd be right back. I ran to get a blanket, but to my surprise, when I returned to the basement, she was gone. I didn't want to worry my wife, so I chose to stay silent. When I went back inside, I told her it was nothing. That night was the longest of my life. I couldn't sleep, worried about what I had seen. The next day, I told the story to some friends, but they thought I was going crazy or it was just the fatigue and stress from working so much. But I know what I saw. That little girl was real. Since then, I avoid taking that detour and always make sure the basement door is well locked. What happened that night still haunts me, and I can never again ignore the stories of strange things happening on stormy days.